The morning of October 29, 2025, dawned quietly over Tanzania, but beneath that calm lay months of tension, fear, and fierce political contest. Across the nation, from the bustling streets of Dar es Salaam to the remote villages of Mwanza, people lined up to vote in an election that many already felt had been decided long before ballots were cast. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, the ruling party's candidate from Chama cha Mapinduzi (CCM), stood almost unchallenged after the country's main opposition party, Chadema, was disqualified from the race. Another opposition contender from ACT Wazalendo had also been barred, leaving voters with little real choice in a contest that was meant to shape the country's future. For weeks, human rights organizations and foreign observers had warned of shrinking democratic space. Journalists were being silenced, civic gatherings restricted, and social media accounts closely monitored. Yet despite the fear, Tanzanians turned out in massive numbers, some driven by hope, others by habit, and many by the deep desire to be counted. As dusk fell, polling stations closed, and the hum of anticipation filled the air. When the Electoral Commission announced the results 2 days later, the news hit like a storm. President Samia Suluhu Hassan had won with 97.66% of the vote, a figure that stunned even some of her own supporters. Turnout was reported at nearly 87%, and CCM declared it a victory of peace and progress. But for millions of Tanzanians, it felt more like a silence imposed from above. Across the country, the opposition and many ordinary citizens rejected the results outright, calling the election a charade. Within hours, the streets of Dar es Salaam, Arusha, and Dodoma erupted into chaos. Protesters poured out carrying placards, waving flags, and chanting for justice and democracy. "We voted for change, not control," one young man shouted as police fired tear gas into the air. What began as peaceful demonstrations quickly spiraled into violent confrontations. Security forces deployed across major cities, curfews were declared, and by nightfall, the internet had slowed to a crawl as the government attempted to choke off communication. Witnesses described a terrifying scene, burning tires lighting up city blocks, police trucks patrolling with sirens wailing, and crowds scattering into the shadows to avoid arrest. The government insisted it was maintaining order, accusing foreign agents and disruptive opposition groups of inciting unrest. Yet images leaking from the ground told another story. Young protesters beaten, streets stained with blood, and families mourning loved ones who never came home. Opposition groups claimed that nearly 700 people had been killed in the protests, though official sources admitted only to a handful of deaths. International observers demanded investigations, while the United Nations reported credible evidence of excessive force. As days turned into nights of uncertainty, Tanzania stood at a crossroads. President Samia addressed the nation from the State House, calling for calm and unity. She promised to lead with compassion and to rebuild trust, but her words were met with skepticism. Many saw her victory as a sign that democracy had been reduced to ceremony, a system where results were known before votes were counted. Still, among the despair, small sparks of resilience burned bright. In neighborhoods silenced by curfew, young people painted murals calling for peace. Churches, mosques, and community leaders gathered quietly, urging citizens not to lose faith. "Tanzania has survived storms before," one pastor said, "and we will rise again if we choose peace over hate." Now, as November unfolds, the nation watches and waits. The ruling party holds its victory tightly, but the people, especially the youth, are restless, demanding a new beginning. The question that lingers in every conversation, whispered through uncertainty and fear, is simple yet profound. Can Tanzania heal from an election that divided its soul? For now, the ballots are counted, the winner declared, but the true test has just begun, whether the country can find a way to move forward, together, from the ashes of a bitterly contested vote. Now that President Samia Suluhu Hassan has secured another term with what the government calls a resounding victory, Tanzania faces a defining moment, one that could determine whether the country drifts deeper into authoritarianism or finds its way back to a more open and democratic path. In the short term, the situation remains tense. The government has deployed security forces across major cities, curfews are still in place in parts of Dar es Salaam and Arusha, and opposition leaders are either in hiding or under heavy surveillance. Internet restrictions, though slightly eased, continue to slow communication and limit news flow. The government insists these are temporary security measures, but many fear they could become a new normal. Samia's immediate challenge is to restore calm and legitimacy. While she has promised reconciliation and dialogue, her administration is also accused of silencing dissent. International pressure is building, from the African Union, the European Union, and even the United Nations, urging her to open political space, investigate alleged abuses, and ensure that future elections are fair. How she handles this pressure could define her legacy. Economically, Tanzania faces mounting uncertainty. Investor confidence has been shaken by the unrest, and tourism, one of the nation's key sources of revenue, is suffering after violent images from the protests spread online. Yet, Samia remains popular among some Tanzanians who see her as a symbol of continuity and stability, especially after steering the country through economic turbulence and regional challenges. Her supporters believe that with time and strong leadership, she can rebuild trust and strengthen growth. However, the opposition, though weakened, is far from defeated. A growing number of young Tanzanians, many of whom took to the streets after the vote, are calling for political renewal. They are demanding fair representation, freedom of expression, and accountability. Social media has become their battlefield, filled with defiant messages and powerful calls for change despite government attempts to control the narrative. If Samia genuinely wants to unite the nation, she must make bold moves, release detained protesters, invite opposition voices to the table, and commit to reforms that make future elections credible. Failure to do so could deepen resentment and widen the divide between the ruling elite and ordinary citizens. So, what's next for Tanzania? The country stands on a knife's edge, between peace and protest, progress and oppression, reform and regression. The next few months will be crucial. Either President Samia will use her overwhelming victory to heal and rebuild the nation's fractured trust, or Tanzania will slide further into a cycle of fear and silence. For now, the world watches, and the people wait, hoping that the promise of leadership turns into the practice of justice. Tanzania's system of government flows like a great river, beginning at the highest peak of power, the president, and branching out through ministries, regions, districts, and villages that carry authority to every corner of the nation. At the top stands the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, the head of state, head of government, and commander-in-chief of the armed forces. She is not only the face of leadership but the heartbeat of policy, steering the country's political, social, and economic direction. Her decisions ripple down through the entire structure, shaping the rhythm of national life. Just below the president stands the vice president, the second-in-command and her closest advisor, entrusted with coordinating the union matters between mainland Tanzania and Zanzibar. The vice president's office ensures that the two sides of the union, the mainland and the islands, work together harmoniously, balancing their unique laws, economies, and administrative systems. Then comes the Prime Minister, who acts as the government's chief organizer in Parliament. The Prime Minister leads government business in the National Assembly, ensuring that the President's agenda is implemented through laws and policies. He connects the executive and legislative branches, serving as the link between the President and members of Parliament. Supporting them is the Cabinet, a powerful council of ministers, each responsible for a specific area such as education, health, defense, finance, and agriculture. These ministers are appointed by the President and serve as her hands and eyes in every sector of the nation. They head ministries filled with civil servants, directors, and commissioners who design and enforce the policies that affect daily life, from school programs to hospital systems, from road projects to national defense. At the regional level, Tanzania is divided into several regions, each led by a regional commissioner. These commissioners act as the President's representatives on the ground. They coordinate government work, maintain peace and order, and ensure that national policies are carried out in their respective territories. Beneath them are district commissioners, who manage smaller administrative zones called districts. Their role is to link the national government with local authorities, oversee development projects, and monitor law enforcement. Further down, each district is subdivided into divisions, wards, and villages, the roots of Tanzania's administrative tree. Ward executive officers and village chairpersons are the direct link between citizens and the state. They handle community concerns, resolve local disputes, and make sure that government programs reach even the most remote areas. At this level, governance becomes personal. Leaders know the faces and stories of the people they serve. Parallel to this structure stands the Parliament, the legislative branch where laws are made. Members of Parliament, MPs, are elected by citizens from constituencies across the country. They debate policies, approve budgets, and act as the people's voice in holding the government accountable. Alongside them is the judiciary, an independent arm that ensures justice, interprets the law, and protects the rights of every Tanzanian. At its head is the Chief Justice, overseeing courts that range from the High Court to small local tribunals. Together, these layers form a living network of governance, a chain that stretches from the president's office in Dodoma to the smallest village council in the rural plains of Kigoma. Power flows from the top, but responsibility rests in every hand that carries it downward. In Tanzania's vision of governance, the president sets the direction, ministers drive the policies, regional and district officials deliver the services, and at the end of that chain stands the ordinary citizen, the true foundation of the republic. Every level, from the grand halls of State House to the humblest village meeting, plays a part in shaping the nation's destiny. And so, the story of Tanzania's government is not just about ranks and titles, it is about connection, duty, and the steady flow of authority from the highest office to the smallest community, ensuring that the will of the people echoes through every level of leadership.